This is Tim Peake, he's the planetary mascot. I accidentally knocked him over last time we had a drink. He was told that's a very expensive cutout. So please be respectful of the space art and so on. So I'm Benjamin Taylor from RedQuadrant. Welcome to our space, or our space is upstairs. This space is belonging to space, specifically the British Interplanetary Society. Quite an interesting organisation. If there is a fire alarm, go straight out the door that you came in, or out the back door and turn out the gate. Go down that way and into the park. We have had some malfunctions with the fire alarm in recent weeks, but the whole building is made of wood, so take it seriously if it goes off. Toilets, gents, are immediately left and at the bottom of the stairs. There are two toilets that ladies can use on the first and second floor landings. Apologies for the inequality. The British Interplanetary Society is strangely gender biased. They have a lot more men as members, I don't know why, than women. So this is one of our regular monthly consultant events that, as part of trying to engage a bit more widely across our massive, incredibly brilliant, incredibly experienced consultant network, represented by you good folks in this room, we've now opened up, rather than to the regular and the working and the sort of core consultants, to everybody, because frankly it is a very porous network, and there's a huge mix of people in the room, from people who are RedQuadrant service leads with a service area responsibility for a particular area of work and kind of ownership of that, to people who have a real deep expertise, and we work with whenever we need that expertise, but it may be from time to time, to people who've been in the network for years and have either been solidly working or done chunks on and off with us, to people I don't recognise at all. So do take this opportunity to network and mingle amongst yourselves, and do please try and keep in touch with us at RedQuadrant and keep coming to the events when they're attractive to you. This one is clearly a very attractive and interesting topic, so I'm indebted for that to Philip Hellyer. Philip is one of our people who work with us on a very...
the nicest things.
Philip is one of our best people who work with us on a fairly continual basis, but also has his own things and his own networks and does his own work. Many of you though will know Philip because he also does a large number of our consultant network interviews. So if you think his voice is familiar, that'll be why. And I was dimly aware that Philip was doing really exciting and interesting work in Paris, and I've also been aware over the years that he's a really genuinely well-regarded expert person in the enterprise architecture field, and a published author to boot. And we try to use those skills whenever we can in RedQuadrant, but sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So he is entirely responsible for the theme of tonight and for bringing Milan and Benji along. And I'm just a participant and an observer like yourselves. So I'll let him introduce them as he works with them and knows them well. And just to say, probably be roughly about half an hour of talking. They're just going to take it as it comes. Questions probably welcome during. Yeah. No. Then we'll have a chat. You've been very abstemious on the sandwiches, so we've still got sandwiches left, I'm pleased to say, and there's plenty of beer, wine, juice, water, tea and coffee, so you're welcome to stay for a good chat afterwards and to mingle and to meet each other. Have I missed out anything obvious? Anything I should be saying? Very well then. Over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, for all those nice things you said, including telling me that I'm a published author, which is a complete lie. Because the man who wrote the book is Milan, and my name's in it somewhere, but so is Benji's. So I think this is brilliant. But one of the things that I thought would be absolutely fabulous to do is to bring together these different communities that I work with, because I think there's a lot of overlap in the things we aspire to do and some of the ways that we work. And so when we reinstated all these monthly get-togethers, I thought, who can I bring to meet my RedQuadrant family, except my enterprise design family? So that's about all I'm going to say, apart from this is Milan, this is Benji, and there's a partner, Dennis, who's in Berlin, that you won't get to meet tonight. But other than that, this is their talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, yeah, as Philip said,
tonight we want to talk a little bit about driving innovation and transformation by design. And we do that particularly by our approach and our framework that is called the Enterprise Design Framework. And to give you a little bit of context, where we're coming from and why we do all this kind of stuff and how it developed. So in 2009, we started working together. We have both a design background. So mainly what we did is initially was user experience design and interaction design. So something in between technology, user research, and design. And then we had one of our first projects was with Boeing. Part of that is Jeppesen, and we were briefed to work on this navigational system for airplanes, and pilots should use that. And we came in mainly as user experience designers, and we thought we can solve everything with the mindset of user experience design. And we tried to get in there, did a lot of research, tried to find out what needs to be in this new software and what device should they use and all that kind of stuff. But over the time we realized that maybe it's a little bit more to it, so we need to really understand the domain. So we started looking at how do you actually fly a plane, and what is all the data behind that you need to keep an airplane in the air. And what they do is they provide this data in a particular way. So they usually sell paper charts, but obviously they wanted to change that into a digital component, and that was this project. Let's say we started to creep in a lot of different areas and realized that maybe it's not enough to just think about a user. What is the business model behind this thing? What are the different touch points? What are the other actors in this ecosystem? What kind of role are they playing? What kind of business processes do we need? What kind of technology do we need? And after a while we realized, maybe this is going beyond what we usually, what was originally interaction design and user experience design. So we just tapped into a lot of different fields and tried to integrate that without a real frame for ourselves. What should be in there, and where do we start, where do we stop? So in this project we realized that was a complex project and a complex environment they're in, and a complex organization they're in. So we realized that we need something that is capable of coping with all these different types of complexities. What we did is that we thought, who is actually working on all of these things? Is there anyone who's claiming to work on all of these things? Is there any discipline? Is there anything that tries to connect all of these things? And we started to basically do research on that, but it was there was not too much that was for us broad enough and at the same time deep enough into the details, so we could say, okay, yeah, this works for us. I don't know, some discipline that really nailed it for us. So we started to create something on our own. So we started thinking about what could be a better frame for us, not saying, okay, this is only about what users would like to use. So we thought, okay, it should be broader. So we came up with a term. It is all about the enterprise of whatever you want to do in the broader sense. Of course, if you hear enterprise, you probably think of this first of all, but that's not exactly what we mean. Another thing is that often, especially coming from the design field, usually what you hear is at a party, for instance, if you say, yeah, I do something with enterprise, they usually think, yeah, it's something big, boring, only about money and only for professionals. but actually what we think a better description of enterprise in the sense we mean it is just from, this is from Wiktionary, so more or less like it is pretty open what it can be, so, and we like that. So it can be a business, can be an organization, but it can be also a purposeful endeavor, which we like, or an undertaking or project, especially a daring or courageous one, or just a willingness to take risky projects, and something that is active. So we thought, okay, that's quite a good frame, so actually just do something and take action. And we came up with the term enterprise design, and yeah, basically that is the design of the enterprise. That's what it means. So with all the different things that you need, all the different people that you need, structures, systems, behaviors, to realize an underlying intent or purpose. So a pretty open frame or that's a frame that is sufficiently open enough for us. As Philip already mentioned, there's a book called Intersection, and Philip helped us by giving good feedback on making it actually better. The author is Milan. It was in 2012 when we started to establish this.
And so Philip turned it into real English.
Yeah.
I did like a Germanish
right.
English.
So yeah, we are both German, and we wrote something that is completely unreadable, I guess, and then Philip turned it into something actionable and real, I would say. Yeah, we started as a company in 2009, and then we changed a little bit in 2011. We call ourselves Enterprise Design Associates, and that and what we do is we work like a network, and that is, for instance, Philip is one of our one of the associates in that network. So we gather a lot of different experts from all the different fields that we initially saw with this very first project. We still think, yeah, they're all relevant, but maybe we need a better frame to bring them all together and something that connects them. And that is the enterprise design frame. We worked on many different projects. We don't have any industry like focus, so we work on everything, and we don't have any predefined solution in mind. So that's why the things that come out there, so the actual output of the design work can be very, very different. So for instance, this is a software, a CMS system, so content management system. This is another project for Boeing. Down there, it's Toyota, and we did something like a cultural change, but also a roadshow and all that kind of stuff. Bottom right is work for Google, so we worked a lot with Google, and there's also the UN, and you see that's pretty much all over the place, and that is also represented in this chart, where you see, okay, we don't have any real focus in any industry. What we see is that even working for all these different clients is that actually the challenges are pretty common they have. So it's not like they work on completely different things. If you look at the common challenges, so the themes that are coming up, it's pretty much always the same. You have the need to become more customer and user oriented. So pretty much everyone is trying to make better experiences, or even start to, in the first place, start to think in experiences, not so much in services and products. Or digital transformation, I mean, that's pretty much everywhere, just changing everything. Then a need to become better at innovation and transformation. And by that we mean innovation, creating something new or changing something, and at the same time transformation, so being able to put everything together in the end. Because just changing here and there without having a bigger picture in mind how it will fit together in the end, probably won't work. And of course, our, I would say, original starting point is this complexity theme that we always see. So how do we get better at dealing and coping with complexity in all these different environments? And also, complexity is increasing often because our world is just changing a lot. So we developed the enterprise design framework. A core piece of that is the stack, which is basically 20 aspects in 5 layers, and it goes from top to bottom, from big picture, which is what is the vision of whatever you try to do, why is it there in the first place, and also what kind of role will it play in people's life. Anatomy, let me check, no. Anatomy is what are the actual things that you need to make this vision applicable. Frames is like different perspectives on that. So you can have a business frame, but you can also have a people frame. And they are both relevant at the same time, but maybe what you will do is very, very different, or how you see things. It can be from a business standpoint, maybe it's a good solution, but maybe from a people perspective, it's not. Design space is what is the classical, let's say, design, where the design fields are usually at. So this is like communication design and interaction design, and where we are originally coming from, that is mainly in that area. So how do you actually design? How do you make, how do you enable people to actually design something? And the rendering part is, so the last layer is the actual output. So what is it that will be there? What is the real design that is tangible, that is visible, and so on? And what is usually happening is, in many different fields, is you stop at a certain point. So you're not going from the very big picture, so the very strategic stuff that will have the impact, down to the rendering level, which will be the real design of something. So like, let's say an app. The app will be down here, but why do you create the app in the first place will be up there. And in between all these layers, we need just to say, okay, what would make sense and how does it fit together? And what we do as a consultancy, but also as, let's say, facilitators and enablers, is to bridge this gap. So how do you bring, or how do you make it happen that people can go the entire road from the very strategic stuff to the actual applied stuff? And oh, by the way, that's our logo. So, and that's what we try to do. Yeah, we thought about maybe just focusing on 3 points in this presentation, because you can see if we say, oh, the entire enterprise, but how do you actually work on that? So we need to be able to make a scope that is relevant and at the same time feasible. The second part is, let's say, the design process. How do you actually work with this scope and produce a new design? And the third point is, how do you make sure that you will have the right impact or the intended impact? So one is, you can have many different perspectives on an enterprise. So sometimes the enterprise is like an elephant in the room. So everyone sees and feels something completely different, and they're all kind of right, but the overall big picture is often missing. So whoever you talk to, everyone is biased. Of course, we are also biased by our background, and you hear that also in the language of people. So nobody is completely free of that. And what we try to do is, of course, bring all these different perspectives that are relevant together and create something, create a beautiful elephant. We apply a lot of systems and complexity, or we integrated a lot of systems and complexity thinking into our work. So probably some of you know this. So it's from Dave Snowden. So you can, all problems are somewhere in one of these quadrants. So you have things that are simple, and I mean, to deal with simple stuff is easy, and you can find out what is the best way, and that's why there's best practice. So if you have a simple problem, you can solve it with simple solutions. If you are in a complicated state, you cannot find a simple solution for that. You will find something that is, or at least you can find things that are similar to that and will work in a certain way, but you cannot find any best practice. It's more like you can see what are good patterns to that, but not apply them just directly. And in the complex area where many of the problems we see are, you can not really use all of the other approaches. It's more like that you have to actually start with something, just do something, see what happens, and respond to that. And that's emergent. So it's important that you know in what kind of quadrant you are in the different phases of your project. And chaotic, I mean, that's the nicest one. I mean, you can do whatever you want because there is no structure at all. And some structure will come afterwards, but usually you're not in a chaotic mode. What we see is that other disciplines try to, or approaches try to solve everything with just processes. And here you can see a nice version where somebody from Deloitte tried to capture all of the different processes, like, I don't know, agile and design thinking methods, but like in a step way approach, which leads to this kind of messy picture. And if you would try to actually use this, I doubt that you will find any good solution with that. And another thing is that still most organizations are more or less structured like this. So you have like Porter describes an enterprise, like you have all this. You have the different activities, and in the end it's like a chain of producing something, and in the end you will get some kind of margin. But the problem is with all the stuff we do is, and here are some terms of what we try to incorporate, is how does it actually fit into these structures? So by definition, a lot of this stuff is just going across all the different silos of an organization. So how do you actually deal with that? And what we see is that often people try to do things like this. They are seen like corporate or enterprise rebels because they are causing a lot of trouble often, because they try to change things and try to make things differently, but at the same time maybe also hurting a little bit the structures that have been there before, so seen as some kind of threat for the organization. And but we see that these types of people are often in an organization and try to change something, but they don't have the right tools, they don't have the right approaches, and we often try to help them have some better tools to actually do what they really want to do. And usually they don't want just to cause problems. I mean, some do, but usually they want to change things because they see that there's a need for change. So, and now comes the awkwardness. I have to.
It's okay, I think. No, maybe not. Thank you. All right. So you might know this picture. It's describing a butterfly effect Lorentz attractor kind of system. He made it originally for the weather. We think often what enterprises behave in when you find yourself in a perfect enterprise storm. It's a little bit like that. So pretty hard to predict. Something that might have happened here is causing the whole system to go something entirely else. And it's tough to deal with these systems. So this is why one of the reasons why our framework exists is to actually deal with this kind of stuff. So we try to map what enterprise, if you have the weather, you have things like temperature, precipitation, and so on. In enterprises, you have what enterprises try to do as ambitious endeavors, as they constantly redesign themselves, whether they actually want to or not. And you have this concept from Mr. Tushman, the ambidextrous organization. So enterprises need to actually constantly look at redesigning themselves and creating something new, but also changing what already exists. So this is one of the spectrums of what's happening in the enterprise space. And what we then add basically is this design spectrum of what designers do, and sometimes they are disguised as architects, consultants, analysts, whatever you call them, whatever you call yourselves, is uncovering opportunities for actually doing some kind of meaningful change and developing solutions to respond to these opportunities, which gives us this enterprise design spectrum, and we basically see enterprises moving across this kind of system. So sometimes they are more looking at opportunities. There you have enterprises that are more research and R&D oriented. You have innovation initiatives, you have transformation initiatives, you have development and solution oriented things, you have engineering there, and all of these things try to kind of shift the enterprise into some kind of new mode and changing what exists. So we think that what we're actually dealing with here is different scales of enterprise change. So we tried to map that a little bit, saying like, okay, if we are looking at opportunities, are they small opportunities or are they big opportunities? Small being something like, well, we can improve something here, or there's a little problem to be solved, like, I don't know, maybe someone doesn't like the music on our call center waiting line, or we have a big opportunity, like saying we can actually make all of our customers happy with this change. You have, at the same time, you have isolated solutions or integrated solutions. So what is the scale of the solution? And this basically corresponds to different degrees of impact for changes. Innovation being either incremental innovations or disruptive innovation, or changes being local in one particular place in the enterprise, or actually doing some system-wide change, which we think corresponds pretty well to the stack that we showed before. So this is a little bit the theory behind the thinking that we have, or that we are applying. So you have the big picture, which is actually aiming at shifting the system, but it's pretty tough because you have to have all this impact. You have to actually create something disruptive, system-wide change, integrated solutions, and address big opportunities. Or you work rather in isolation on what we call the rendering level. So you improve this or you improve that, and you have incremental change. And but there are good examples of incremental changes leading to actually big improvements. One example was, for example, to introduce color coding in hospitals, which significantly reduced the failures in treatment. So, and there are still many hospitals that don't do it. And there you actually see that there's a rendering level change that then has some kind of meaning that has impact on a larger scale on the enterprise. And this is the kind of stuff that we try to come up with, basically, together with our clients. So yeah, this is the how it maps to the stack. Inside the stack you have these little aspects which we use to make sense of the enterprise, and also to include perspectives that make sense and disciplines that we think add value in a given situation. So the stack looks like this in full. This is the one that also is introduced in intersection. So you have the big picture to the rendering, which we try to bridge, and then on the big picture level you have fundamental questions, stepping very far away from the enterprise and looking at it and asking, okay, who is that? That's the identity. You could say it's culture and brand. Experiences, like what is the role that they actually play in people's lives? Why are they here? And architecture, in our definition, is how does everything work? All the systems, all the structures. How does it actually work as a system? And then the rendering, you have how does it come to life as science or media, like for example, color-coded systems in hospitals. What kind of things does it produce? What kind of places does it make? Places being things like also, it could be an office or a shop, could also be the Facebook page, somewhere people go to do something with the enterprise. And in between we have all the stuff, all the aspects that we found relevant to make this bridge. So who are the actors? What are their journeys across the touch points with the enterprise? What kind of services, what kind of content exists? How can we look at it from a business perspective to make sense of what they want to do, from a people perspective to actually understand who the customers or the employees really are, not just their role, but who are they really, working with anthropological and ethnographic methods. Systems perspectives in understanding the functions, the purposes, and the structures also, the systems, and how the domain is structured. And then making an awful lot of decisions. How should this enterprise communicate? How do they chunk information and make it findable? How do they operate in processes? How do they organize themselves? And what do they do with technology? So you see it's a very design-centric framework, but at the same time pretty open. We don't say that it's completely, it's not a full, we call this the full stack, but it's just because we think 20 is enough. You could add other things. You could also, given some problem, you actually often just look at a part of it, like 5 to 10 of these aspects. But the decision, how you want to look at the enterprise, should be conscious. In order to make this decision, we have this tool that we call the assessment, where we actually reduce the enterprise aspects to some extremely simple and you could say boiled down, almost stupid statements, like for example services, where you have the whole discipline of service design, service innovation, service delivery, many smart people thinking a lot about services and service theory. It's boiled down to bad services or valuable, helpful services. And we ask people to select out of these 40 statements, one negative and one positive for each aspect, which one matter the most for them. And if everyone says bad services, then maybe we get a service designer. So this is what this then looked like. The take action score is calculated out of how many people responded bad services, compared to how many people said good services and how many people voted on the service dimension all in all. And basically the theory, which is a methodology that we took and adapted from a approach called Top Tasks from Jerry McGovern. It tells you if you have $100 to improve your enterprise, or £100, maybe put 24 into services. Maybe put 19 into designing your graphics, because everyone thinks it's incoherent and hard to look at. And maybe work on your identity. In this case, we can also ask customers what they think of your enterprise, and we do the same with employees and managers, finding a gap, if one exists, often it does, of where the internal view and the external view are different, or also the leadership views and the normal staff views are different. And this then leads to this chunking the enterprise into concerns that are being expressed, questions that are being asked, ideas that some people have of how and where it should go, opportunities and constraints. And it's like this Rubik's Cube, so it's impossible to understand it entirely, but you can turn it around, you can look at it from different perspectives, and you can list these things. So the survey we do just as a, I would say, it's a compass, it's a starting point, and then research, stakeholder interviews, document reviews, baseline modeling, you name it, all comes at the help to make sense and to find a good way forward. And there we basically use the stack like this language, so everyone familiar, also from different disciplines, everyone familiar with it, can basically use it and make sense of the enterprise, stack together the different elements and create a model of it. So then this is the whole framework. So we have the stack in the middle, and then based on the same model that I showed before, so to create something new, uncovering opportunities, we have the scan, which includes this assessment on all the research. We have the design sprint, which is how to create something new, new products, new services, new areas. modeling what exists and what should exist, and also creating systems, design systems, enabling the enterprise to actually develop solutions and change itself. So today we will just do some tiny case studies, mainly in the sprint area, and a little bit of scenarios. And starting with this client project called Toyota Fast Forward, a very interesting brief. We are too competitive. No, that's what they, yeah. We are too competitive internally. So everyone is competing with each other in our organization, and we are not collaborative and creative enough. We want to change this. We have this initiative with the very nice name NMD Action. NMD comes from the previous CEO called New Management Direction. The new CEO added the word action, so New Management Direction Action. This is the kind of stuff that we call enterprise awkwardness. They don't know how to name things, and everything kind of makes sense for them, and no one outside understands why. So we said, no, you are now called Fast Forward. Here's a logo that is very direct, telling you what it is about. We did a survey where we asked what activities are people doing in the enterprise, so staff members, or members as Toyota calls them in their jargon, that are valuable, and which ones are the most time consuming. And you see here, for example, email is the most time consuming activity, and the 30th was most valuable. It's also like a vote, really just 100 tasks, and which we boiled down from a big list, and people voting. Idea generation, very valuable, but people don't have time for it. Strategy the same, briefing team members the same, but dealing with the mothership, because this is Toyota Europe, so dealing with Toyota Motor Corporation in Japan, very time consuming, not a lot of value. So trying to change that and trying to help them have more time for the valuable management tasks and spending less time on emails was important. So this is how the methodology works. Basically, usually what we get is very, very, very few tasks. In this case, this is example from data from the OECD. Very few tasks get a lot of the vote. So by concentrating on these tasks, you actually kind of are very likely to have a lot of impact. So this is what we did there as well. And then in the tiny tasks area, so the long tail, stuff that no one actually votes for, you have a lot of stakeholder attention. A good example is corporate news, or very important. Everyone needs to know about something. And yes, normally never gets voted. So this is the kind of, let's say, making the scope, doing these surveys, doing the research, having the conversations, and using the stack to navigate the problem space and also open a solution space. And then we move into more of the, I'd say, co-creative quadrant by using design sprints. Design sprints have been, I would say, not invented, but introduced by GV, Google Ventures. Then Google came along and said, okay, we would like to use that too, but not for startups. We take our own version of it. So the original version is very, very rigid, that GV used for their startup in their portfolio. Originally there's 5 days, 7 people, and very detailed roster of activities. Then Google came along and said, no, we want a 2-hour version, a 3-day version, a 2-week version, and we want one for strategy and one for material design, and one for Android and one for voice interfaces and so on. So it got a little bit, diversified, we could say. And then we came along when we were working with them and saying, we should actually not only do that, but we should cross it with our enterprise design framework in order to make sure we are working on the right problem, and also considering everything that we need to look at, so everything that matters when working on this small bite-sized chunk of enterprise that we want to change. We need to also get the right people in the room and get into this mode of incremental delivery. The method itself is a kind of classic design process, but so you go through research, definition, what you want to do, experimentation, prototyping, validation, does it actually work, to implementation. We added 2 phases at the very beginning and at the very end, which is an engagement phase. So make sure that you don't accept the briefing because it's probably wrong, and instead have the right conversations and maybe do a scan, so do the assessment. and a delivery phase where we actually want to see whether we have the impact or an impact that we wanted or that we accept as being good, because in a complex domain you're not always able to predict. And then iteration. And you see here we use the framework, the stack, like a lift, starting at the big picture if possible. So if the briefing is somewhere here, we try to lift it up and say, okay, why? Why do you? Why? Ah, okay, big picture. And then going slowly down until we reach the rendering, until we have some kind of prototype that is an evidence of the new enterprise. If you do it thoroughly, then the prototype normally will have many different media and touch points. So you might have an intranet page, a new call center script, some new office environment, and maybe an initiative with a logo. That's fine, because normally if you want to change the enterprise, it has to be a kind of a cross-channel and cross-delivery solution. Getting everyone in the room who is important. So for example, let's say we have found that processes and operational questions are important. So maybe someone who is into that, business architect, business analyst, process manager. Maybe we need someone who's more into brand and service and so on. So using the stack also to cast our team and choose the right sprint flavor. The flavor is, okay, what are we actually working on? Are we really on a strategic level? Are people asking where do we want to go? Or is it more, we want to experiment, we want to find many options and might make many different prototypes and then get to the conclusion which one worked best? Or is it an engagement sprint, which means we actually don't look so much at the outcome, but we want to get everyone in the room and agree? Or is it a realization sprint where we kind of know what we're doing, like we want to do this app for dogs, but yeah, we want to sprint on how exactly that looks like. So this is how the sprint then plays out. People make models. We use a lot of Lego for this to get into people's abstraction capacities. We put the data on the wall that is relevant, and we give people really just activities and tools, often very short, very time-boxed, to work on this and to go through the process in a very guided fashion. This is an example of a model that has been made in the sprint with Toyota, and really inventing the models when we need them. So not relying on standard models like capability maps or service blueprints, but really say, okay, what is now important here? Like in this case, we have some personas. It's a culture change program, so how do they behave now and how do we want them to behave? What are they doing all day where we can have this influence, and what can we provide in order to make it happen, make that shift happen? And then people started to fill that out and make these models. And engaging the organization. So this is how this is what the roadshow then looked like. We just took this brand and literally turned it into an exhibition space in the atrium, buying red tables from IKEA and just putting some data on screens, having some printing some cards with the relevant data and relevant questions, and just really have people talk about it, talk about what's happening, talk about this, and planning sprints all along. So at Toyota we actually managed to make sprints a kind of a self-runner. So we did a few kickoffs and then people started sprinting on all sorts of stuff. And initially people said, yeah, we can work on the culture shift, we can work on we make surveys, HR is okay with that, and we do the roadshow, but that's it. We don't have any mandate to change, for example, a process or a policy. But our way to circumvent that is by, okay, discussing this kind of stuff with the stakeholders and convince them that in order to have influence on the experience, on the employee experience, and have new member and customer journeys, we have to make this connection. So we deliberately went into all the organizational units and did sprints on questions that would touch the policies, like for example a career path. And that way, kind of through the back door, got the influence that initially we didn't have on the basically hardwired stuff that you would call the architecture in our jargon. Very important, not using our jargon with the client, using their jargon. Yeah, that was the first case study, and the second one is about scaling sprints to have some more impact even, and there our featured client is Deutsche Telekom. Yep. Awkward moment number 2. How are we on time? Well, we just continue if you get...
if you're all sleeping, I will recognize that. So, yeah, since 2011 we are working for and with Deutsche Telekom, and their problem is that their initial intranet was not really structured in a way they would like it to be, and they wanted to become, or it should become, a place that is more like a real digital workplace and not like a typical, let's say, old intranet. Typical thing is that it's cluttered, so it's difficult to find enough information. It's not at all made to actually really work with it. It's more like a bucket of information, and you can try to find whatever you need, but it's hard to do that. And there was no real aspect of collaboration and actually working in that thing and also communicating with this platform. What they tried to come up with is a new vision of how it should be in the future, so more like a seamless experience for all kinds of different employees, and it should feel more like, okay, you go into this thing and it's more like a real working tool, and not so much yeah, there is stuff and you can find it, but you get lost pretty soon and frustrated. So the idea was to create one platform for pretty much everything you need for your daily job. And there was a strong notion of it should be way more about communication and collaboration, and not so much anymore about just storing some kind of data and information. What we did is after like years, to be honest, we started to introduce some new methodologies. So in this case it was our sprint methodology, trying to for the first time make it a little bit bigger, so try to scale it, because usually you have like a small sprint, which means that it's just a small team and usually 1 or 2 teams, and we said maybe we can work on that a little differently and have more people and more topics and just more results pretty much in the same period of time. So what we did is we invited or organized this event together with internal partners at Deutsche Telekom to bring together 70 people, work with them on different topics for 2 days, with the goal to have go through the entire process of a sprint. So going from what is our vision for this topic to what is the actual thing that we will build. And the setup was that we had 6 sprint masters, so every sprint master, so somebody who facilitates that sprint from our side, and working with these 12 teams. So that meant that every sprint master had 2 teams to take care of, and then run them through this sprint. And the interesting part was that they already said in the beginning that they will just find some budget to actually go in the sprint and say, okay, whatever is good enough, we will build it right away after the sprints. That gave, of course, a huge motivational boost to everyone who is involved, because they were working pretty much on their own work environment, on the digital work environment. So what we did is we worked on visions, on concepts. In this case, they started to prototype what a solution could look like. For instance, on the right-hand side, they thought about a chatbot that they would like to integrate into the system. And you can see there that they prototyped it in a funny way. So they made a video. One guy was the chatbot and the other one was the real human. And just to show the entire story. So they were able to tell their story by creating a vision that was telling enough, and then came up with concepts. And after 2 days already had a prototype that had already gotten a lot of feedback, because there were 70 people in the room and everyone was an expert on something. So we made them present we made them present over and over what they think could be relevant to this new intranet. And we also let them present in a way that they could gather the feedback and already try to find the right people to actually afterwards work on that. And that worked pretty well. So for 2 days, I think everyone, especially on their side, they were pretty amazed how much content you can produce that is good enough to actually go to someone and say, yeah, we should build this, because we were able to validate that it has enough value and it will probably have the right impact we want to see. What we did is that we are always trying to design for this strategic impact. So it's not enough just to say, okay, yeah, we have some solution and somehow it will influence the bigger picture. We want to make this more explicit. So what they produced in that sprint was basically a common vision of what they want to do. So that is the why question. So the upper part of the framework, and the how was in that design space. How do you actually build this thing? So they came up with a new, for instance, paradigm how to develop their technical solutions within that new platform. And they were able to say, pretty much to a sufficient detail, already say, okay, what should be really on our new intranet? So how does it really feel? And they were able to test it afterwards. So that was the what are we actually building? And to make this leap is what we try with every sprint. So not only working on one thing, because often you get stuck in the why question, or you get stuck in how do we actually do it? Or you just care about, okay, yeah, we have some solution, but we don't really know what it will do on the bigger picture. And to bring all these things together, that is what we try to do. And we help them to deliver also by developing something that we called a playbook, so principles and also descriptions of what kind of roles of people do we need for that, how should they work together, how can they assess and measure success, and also made it pretty actionable by integrating these kind of things already, of course, into the new intranet as well. So it became this kind of working tool during these 2 days. Of course, not everything has been produced in these 2 days, but at least everyone had a common vision of what it could be, and afterwards it was way easier to actually go to the right people and talk to them and tell them that this is the stuff we want to develop.
Okay, that's the last time. So, just to finish, this is something that is more for the geeks. It's a project we did with the United Nations, a small agency called UNICDR, and they came and said, yeah, no one knows what we're doing and our website is very bad. Those two things basically. They are caring about disaster risk reduction. So basically helping governments and organizations, mostly governments, but also everyone else involved in preparing better for disasters. I drew this in the first workshop with them. This represents their brand landscape. So you have the UNICDR, you have all the frameworks that they produce, the Hyogo framework of action, the global assessment report. You have this website that they was talking about called preventionweb.com. You have campaigns like My City is Getting Ready. and so on. And they produce all of these brands and all of these logos. We put them also into this more like nicer version, we thought, as designers. You know, here are the actual logos and how they are related. No, they preferred this one because it showed the mess so much, and it showed like why does no one recognize us again? And why don't we stand out against the other UN agencies and against all the NGOs that are in this field? So this was one of our first really successful models. And Microsoft is decommissioning Paint. I will miss it dearly. We at some point in this work encountered such a level of complexity that we decided to steal an enterprise architecture tool. Not steal it, but let's say heavily abuse it. So this is Archie, and it supports only one language called Archimate, and it's really made for enterprise architecture, so it doesn't have any of the elements that we need. So we just repurposed everything. So instead of business collaboration, it's a touch point. Instead of actor, it's a persona. Instead of little cloudy meaning, it's a brand, and so on. So just really make our own meta model that looked like this. So what are the people doing in their ecosystem? What tasks are they? Who is it really that we are designing for? What are the goals that the organization wants to achieve? Is mostly like less impact of disasters. How's UNISDR organized, and what are the processes and organizational structures that they have? And then also this website stuff. Like what websites are they making, and what content and functional features do they have? And we decided that the one thing that will hold all of this together in this case is a concept of service. Brands representing a service, processes enabling a service, websites being like the public interface of the service, tasks being what the service is made for, and goals and outcomes what the service should contribute to. And we made a lot of modeling like this. For example, here's a service, and all the processes that support it, all the brands that represent it, and all the tasks on the ecosystem of people who want to prepare for disasters that depend on this service, which is country information, so looking up whether the UK is well prepared for disasters or not. And this kind of was the self-identification or self-assessment, self-discovery. Everyone in our organization is doing the same thing. We don't know that. We don't talk about this. We don't exchange. Every brand is also representing the same services. And like the whole organization it could be heavily optimized, let's say. There's a huge potential for optimization. We showed this to the client, especially to the senior leaders, and they said, what? Didn't we ask you about a website? Stop this, start working on the website, because this is our job, this is not yours. You're designers, process and organization and stuff, that's not your thing. So okay, little backlash, but we went back and said, okay, at least we have this, based on the modeling, we came up with this, together with the client, with this kind of target model of what services should exist across which service lines. And then we went back into a nice designerly application and made this model where, the digital stuff is on top, the websites. We took their model of how they work, so raising awareness for disaster preparation, providing guidance, building capacity and implementing with a decreasing role and who's involved in that. And then we took these service lines that came out of the modeling and said, okay, you know what? On the community level, so engaging the community and the capacity building, there's a gap. And we put together with them like a candidate service there, which was called dating. So if you are Switzerland and you want to prepare for disasters, it could be cool to talk to Bolivia, because they also have mountains. So this kind of dating between countries was a service that came out of the modeling. The client, especially the senior leaders, forgot that at some point and said, I thought this was their idea, which is perfect. So this is what we often try to do with our modeling, is to kind of do this kind of inception trick. And that's good, because that's the way you have impact. And this model also worked very well, so that in the end we were able to say, okay, this is how the organization should change, and also say, okay, it's still kind of working on the user experience of the website, but in a very large sense. Nowadays we say Archimate is actually not doing it for us anymore, so we invented our own modeling language called EDML. It's the Enterprise Design Modeling Language. it's just 3 elements: entities, activities, and qualities. We add the little aspect icons, and that way we can say, okay, we can model a task of some kind of user with having some experience by having an activity and putting the little eye on it, or we can model a process by using exactly the same element and putting a little factory on it, and that way we can actually say, this experience is supported by this service, and this service needs this business process. So shifting perspectives, but always looking at the same part of the same elephant, different parts, and how they are interconnected. Some example that I will just skip, but this is how it looks like in QualiWare, who implemented this. Yeah. For doing this kind of stuff, we are currently we are heavily involved with QualiWare. They are an EA modeling tool vendor, trying to bring in the design perspective and the modeling that we do into their tools. And we are looking for, let's say, lab projects where we can provide heavily a lot of value very quickly, like in about 3 months. Doing this enterprise scan, establishing a customer perspective, doing a strategy sprint, modeling relevant things, doing a second sprint, and coming out with a roadmap for the clients. So if you have anyone in mind who might benefit from this kind of approach, write me an email. And we do a conference every year. The last one was just a few weeks ago in Barcelona, called Intersection, like the book. We did 4 now. And the next one is very likely to be in Prague in summer, and we are doing an open call for participation. So if you have any enterprise designer league kind of projects, but you want like to talk about case studies or cool approaches that you think this community should hear about, also let me know. And the past videos of the past talks, we filmed them all. Not yet the latest edition, because we have some trouble with the material, but we are working on that, and it will be uploaded soon. But all the previous years of the 4 previous conferences, the talks are on YouTube. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Milan and Benji. Hope people find that interesting. I know that we've still got some sandwiches and wine and juice left, but if any people got some quick questions before we go to them.
Hi, Ulrike Rother.